Chapter 1. The Reluctant Visit. The dirt road stretched long and featureless beneath the bruised evening sky. Trevor Lennox drove slow, tires crunching loose gravel, headlights cutting thin lines through the gathering mist. On either side, endless fields of wheat swayed in slow motion, their tips catching what little light remained. The farmhouse came into view just as the sun slipped behind the distant hills. It was small, weathered, and alone. No neighbors for miles. A single porch light burned over the door, casting a dull yellow pool onto the cracked wooden steps. Trevor parked at the edge of the gravel drive, engine ticking into silence. For a long moment, he simply sat there, staring at the house. He hadn't come to debunk. He hadn't come to believe. He had come to listen, because something about Daniel Reese's voice on the phone, low, hesitant, weighted with a kind of tired terror, had told him this wasn't just another campfire story or small-town myth. This man had seen something, and it had seen him back. Trevor stepped out into the cooling air. His boots crunched against the gravel. The smell of damp earth and cut wheat hung heavy. From the porch, a figure emerged, middle-aged, gaunt. Shoulders hunched inward like he was trying to make himself smaller. A cigarette burned low between two fingers, forgotten. Daniel Reese. He watched Trevor approach without moving, the screen door creaking slightly in the soft breeze. Trevor stopped at the bottom of the steps, introduced himself. Daniel nodded once, as if greeting wasn't necessary between people who both already knew the weight of the thing hanging in the air. "Come in," Daniel said, voice rough and quiet. Inside, the house smelled of dust, coffee, and something sharper. Ozone, maybe. The kind of smell that lingered after lightning had struck too close. Trevor followed Daniel into a small kitchen, dimly lit by a single overhead bulb. No family photos, no television. Just a table, two chairs, and a tape recorder already sitting in the center, waiting. Daniel gestured to a chair. Trevor sat. The recorder clicked on with a mechanical whir, and in the heavy silence that followed, Daniel Reese's story began, not with an explosion, not with panic, but with a whisper. It wasn't the lights that scared me. It was the way they knew I was watching. Outside, the field swayed in a slow, patient rhythm, and the first true night between worlds began. Chapter 2. The Man Who Didn't Want to Speak. Daniel Reese sat across from Trevor, the table between them a thin and fragile barrier. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence, each second dragging against the next. Daniel didn't speak right away. He stared at the recorder, the cigarette burning down to ash between his fingers, forgotten. His eyes, deep-set, rimmed with sleeplessness, twitched toward the window every few moments, as if checking the fields for something only he could sense. Trevor waited. He knew better than to push. Finally, Daniel dragged a hand through his thinning hair and leaned back in his chair with a long, tired exhale. "I didn't call you because I wanted to tell this," he said. "I called because I can't live with it locked up anymore." Trevor nodded slowly. "Tell it in your own time." Daniel crushed the cigarette in a chipped saucer, exhaling smoke that curled into the kitchen light like a fading memory. He rubbed at the scar on his forearm unconsciously, as if it itched from the inside. "It's not just what I saw," he said, voice rough. "It's what it did to the night, to time, to everything." Trevor clicked on a second recorder, his own, setting it unobtrusively to the side. Daniel noticed but didn't object. His fingers tapped a slow rhythm against the tabletop, nervous energy or a subconscious echo of something deeper. "You ever been somewhere and just known you weren't supposed to be there?" he asked, eyes meeting Trevor's. Trevor held his gaze, gave the smallest nod. Daniel nodded back, as if that answer, unspoken, unfinished, was the permission he needed. "Then you already know how it starts," he said. "It ain't the lights. It ain't the sounds. It's the feeling." He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping into something closer to prayer than conversation. "The feeling that something bigger than you has noticed you're alive. Outside, The wheat shifted under invisible hands, and Daniel Reese began to tell the story he had buried for too long. Chapter 3. The Night It Began. Daniel's voice steadied as he leaned into the memory, hands clasped tightly in front of him. It was late, after midnight. Sky was clear. You could see the Milky Way like brushstrokes across the whole thing. He paused, rubbing at his face. Started with the animals. Dogs wouldn't stop barking. Then they stopped all at once. Not like they got tired, like something turned them off. Trevor scribbled a few quiet notes, not wanting to break the flow. Daniel continued. I went out onto the porch, thought maybe a coyote or a cougar was prowling, but the fields were empty. No wind, no crickets. Just, he faltered for a second, swallowing hard. Wrongness. That's the only word I got. It was like the night had shifted, like it wasn't pointed at me anymore, but around me. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if the words lived somewhere above. Then I heard it. Trevor lifted his head. What did you hear? Daniel's eyes unfocused, drifting inward. Not a sound, exactly. A vibration, like the way you feel bass through the floor at a concert. Only this was under my skin. He pulled a battered silver lighter from his pocket, turning it over and over in his palm as he spoke. It came from the east field, low, humming, building up like a heartbeat slowing down. Trevor jotted a phrase. Deep harmonic vibration, subaudible. Daniel glanced out the window again, instinctively. I thought I was going to see a chopper, or one of those big ag drones. But there weren't nothing mechanical about it. His voice dropped lower, and then I saw the light. Outside, a branch tapped softly against the window pane. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked on, and Daniel's story spiraled deeper into the night that would change him forever. Chapter 4. The Light That Wasn't Light. Daniel's hands tightened into fists on the table as he spoke. It wasn't a beam, wasn't a searchlight or a flare. It moved wrong. Trevor leaned in slightly. Describe it. Daniel exhaled slowly, the words sticking. It came up from the field like a ripple, like someone pulling a sheet of water straight out of the ground, but it wasn't shining, it was glowing, like the light was trapped inside it trying to get out. He closed his eyes, remembering. At first, it was the size of a man. Then it grew, stretched, not up, out, wider, like it was trying to spread across the field but couldn't find the shape it needed. Trevor wrote, self-contained luminescence, distortion effect, expanding field. Daniel continued, voice shaking. Colors I can't describe right. Mostly white, but bending around the edges like oil on water, like it couldn't decide what color it was supposed to be. He tapped the lighter nervously against the table. I should have run. Every part of me told me to run, but I couldn't move, like the air got thick, heavy, like I was pinned there. Outside, the mist crept higher along the window glass, ghostly and silent. Daniel's voice dropped to a near whisper. Then I realized it wasn't just in the field. He pointed toward the kitchen. It was in the house, too. In the walls, in the floor, in me. Trevor looked at him carefully. You're saying the light wasn't external? Daniel's mouth twisted. I'm saying it was everywhere at once. The clock ticked. The mist thickened. And Trevor understood they were no longer talking about light in the way people understood it. They were talking about presence. About something that could touch reality like fingers through mist and leave fingerprints on a man's soul. Chapter 5. The Breach of Time. Daniel stared at the kitchen table as if seeing something far beyond it. After the light came, time didn't work right anymore. Trevor leaned forward slightly. Explain that for me. Daniel shook his head, struggling. I tried to step back inside, into the house, one step onto the porch, and everything changed. He rubbed his hands together, trying to ground himself. I saw myself, for a second, standing there. Same place, same boots. But not now. Trevor's pen paused. You saw a duplicate? Daniel nodded, mouth dry. Not like a mirror, not a reflection. It was me, but I wasn't moving, and everything around him, me, was slower, dripping slow. He tapped his temple. I could feel my thoughts pulling apart, like one part of me was standing still and the other was sliding. Trevor scribbled. Temporal dislocation, overlapping self-observation. Daniel breathed shallowly, voice rough. The stars above the field? They started spiraling, spinning, faster and faster, like a whirlpool sucking down the whole sky. He wiped his mouth with a shaky hand. And every time I blinked, I wasn't sure what second I was blinking into. Trevor stayed silent, letting the description hang heavy between them. Daniel's eyes finally lifted. You ever been so scared you forgot how old you were? Trevor met his gaze, nodded once. Daniel nodded back, almost grateful. That's what it was like. Outside, the mist wrapped tight around the farmhouse, sealing them in a pocket of memory that still hadn't finished bleeding into reality. Trevor clicked the recorder quietly. Daniel's voice dropped lower. It wasn't just space they broke, Mr. Lennox. They broke time. Chapter 6. The Shape Beyond Logic. Daniel's hands clenched tight around his battered lighter as he spoke, knuckles pale. When the sky spun itself into that whirlpool, the light in the field twisted. He stared at Trevor, voice hollow. It didn't rise, didn't fall. It just bent. Trevor leaned forward slightly, letting the silence invite more. Daniel's voice grew quieter. It wasn't a craft, it wasn't a body, it was a shape. He pressed 2 fingers together in the air, trying to illustrate something that refused easy description. Imagine space folding like paper. Folding, unfolding, faster than you can think about it. Lines where lines shouldn't be, angles that didn't make sense. He shook his head. Every time it moved, it erased the space it had just been in. Like it wasn't crossing distance, it was canceling it. Trevor scribbled. Non-Euclidean movement. Dimensional overlay? Daniel glanced at the recorder. You can put whatever science words you want on it, Mr. Lennox, but I'll tell you plain, it wasn't built to be seen by us. He looked up sharply. It wasn't designed for eyes like ours. Outside, the mist pressed harder against the window, and somewhere in the distance, something creaked. Too slow, too heavy to be wind. Daniel's voice dropped to a rasp. I don't think it was visiting. A long beat of silence. I think it was remembering. Chapter 7. The Voice Without Sound. Daniel's face tightened as if pulling against a memory that still burned hot beneath the surface. It didn't talk to me, he said. Not the way we talk. Trevor scribbled quickly, listening intently. Daniel tapped his temple with a trembling finger. It pushed. Thoughts, feelings, concepts. He shook his head, as if the effort to contain it all still strained him. No words, no language, just pressure. Like someone laying maps and memories over my mind without permission. Trevor leaned in slightly. What kinds of memories? Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was low and cracked. Loneliness, distance, cold rivers of black space stretching longer than time. He opened his eyes, rimmed with unshed tears, and regret, a deep kind, like it missed something. Something it had a hand in making and then losing. The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead, but neither of them moved. Trevor wrote, telepathic impression, emotion-based, non-verbal. Daniel exhaled sharply, voice fraying. But the worst part, the part I can't shake. He leaned closer over the table. It didn't feel like a stranger. Trevor's hand paused over the page. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. It felt like family. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, The mist thickened until it erased the horizon entirely. And somewhere far above, or maybe right outside the window, something waited with a patience not born of kindness, but of eternity. Chapter 8. The Missing Hours. The kitchen felt smaller now, like the mist outside had pressed inward, shrinking the space between the two men. Trevor let the silence stretch before asking carefully, "What happened next, Daniel?" Daniel stared at the tabletop, the battered lighter turning slowly between his fingers. "That's the thing, Mr. Lennox," he said, voice raw. "I don't know." Trevor didn't interrupt. Daniel continued. "One second, I'm standing there, the shape folding the sky into itself, and the next," he shivered slightly. "It's morning." The clock ticked loudly between them. Daniel looked up, face drawn and pale. "I woke up sitting in the east field, sun just peeking over the ridge, shirt torn, boots dry, and hours gone." Trevor leaned in. "Do you remember anything from the missing time?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Not memories, not dreams, impressions." He rubbed his forearm absent-mindedly, the place where the scar now lay. "Hands, light so bright it hurt my teeth, and sounds, not noises but shapes moving through me." Trevor scribbled. "Fragmented recall, bodily sensations, sound geometry." Daniel closed his eyes, breathing shallowly. "I remember feeling weightless, like a moth caught in amber, like the ground was gone but I didn't fall." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And there were others." Trevor's hand paused over the page. "Others?" Daniel nodded, eyes still closed. "Not human, not them either. Something in between, shapes inside the light, watching me, like they were waiting for instructions." A shudder ran visibly through him. And then, nothing, like a door slamming shut. He opened his eyes, haunted. And when I woke up, I knew they weren't done. Outside, the wind stirred the mist for the first time all night, curling in strange spiral patterns across the window glass. Chapter 9. The Mark He Cannot Explain. The lighter clicked against the tabletop once, twice, then fell still in Daniel's hand. He sat forward slowly, bracing himself like the next part of the story was heavier than words alone could carry. Without speaking, he rolled up the sleeve of his flannel shirt. Trevor watched in silence. There, on Daniel's forearm, pale against the weathered skin, was a scar. Not a jagged wound or a rough accident scar. This was surgical, precise. A thin, almost perfect spiral etched into his flesh, faintly raised, as if it had been pressed into him rather than cut. Trevor's breath caught slightly. "When did you first notice it?" he asked quietly. Daniel rubbed the mark gently, eyes distant. "That morning, after I woke up in the field." He gave a bitter half-smile. "Thought maybe I scraped it on barbed wire. Went to the doctor. They said it looked old, like it had healed over weeks." Trevor leaned in, studying the mark carefully. It wasn't random. It wasn't the chaotic scarring of an accident. It was designed. He jotted a note. "Scar matches spiral motif. Evidence of time distortion. Imprint mechanism." Daniel let his sleeve fall back down. "But it ain't just the scar," he said. Trevor looked up. Daniel's voice was raw again, worn thin by sleepless nights and unspoken fears. "Every few weeks, I get dreams. Same ones." He stared into the distance. "I'm floating in black space. Can't move, can't scream. And around me, the same shapes." He lifted a trembling hand, tracing the spiral in the air, over and over, like they're waiting for me to understand. The mist pressed harder against the windows, and the faint sound of distant, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming lightly on glass, echoed from somewhere unseen. Trevor clicked his recorder off without thinking. Some moments didn't need documentation. Some moments needed only to be remembered. Chapter 10. The Visitors in the Corners. Daniel's hand rested heavily on the table now, as if speaking the truth aloud had taken the last of his strength. Trevor waited, the air between them dense with tension. Daniel finally spoke, his voice lower, as if he feared being overheard even now. They didn't leave. Trevor leaned in slightly. Daniel's eyes darted toward the corners of the room, toward the cracks where shadow pooled. "I still see them," he whispered. "Not like that night, not full, just glimpses." He motioned with his hand, quick, nervous gestures. "At the edge of my vision, where the light doesn't reach." Trevor kept his voice calm. "What do you see, Daniel?" Daniel breathed out slow, shallow. "Shapes. Sometimes tall, like they're standing against the hallway wall. Sometimes small, hunched low, almost crawling." He rubbed his temple, wincing. "They're fast, always slipping back before I can turn my head. But they're there, watching, remembering." Trevor wrote, "Persistent peripheral phenomena, post-encounter surveillance, sensory bleed-through." Daniel's fingers twitched against the tabletop. "Sometimes they're in the mirrors, sometimes behind the trees when I drive to town." He gave a humorless chuckle. "Once thought I saw one sitting at the diner, just sitting there. Nobody else noticed." Trevor studied him carefully. No sign of deceit, no wild-eyed hysteria. Just a man who knew too much and had nowhere to put it. Daniel's voice dropped one final octave, barely a breath. "It ain't just remembering the night anymore, Mr. Lennox. It's living with it, every day." Outside, the mist lapped against the farmhouse like a slow, patient tide. And inside, Trevor felt the heavy certainty that Daniel Reese wasn't haunted by a memory. He was still inside the encounter. He had never left. Chapter 11. The Question Trevor Doesn't Want to Ask. The clock on the kitchen wall ticked steadily, marking time in a room where time had already once betrayed its own laws. Trevor tapped his pen lightly against the notebook, thinking. There was a question he didn't want to ask, because he already knew the answer would be worse than any theory he could write down, but he asked it anyway, quietly, gently. "Daniel, do you think they'll come back?" The old farmer didn't hesitate. He didn't have to think about it. His gaze lifted, steady and certain, as if he had carried the answer for years, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to ask. They never left. Daniel leaned back in the chair, eyes distant. "You don't get a visit, Mr. Lennox. You get opened." He touched the scar beneath his sleeve. "Whatever they did that night, it's still happening. Just slower, like roots growing under your house, like mold you can't see." Trevor felt the hair rise along the back of his neck. Daniel continued, "You might not notice it, might not feel it, but it changes you, little by little. You stop dreaming your own dreams. You start feeling places you ain't never been." He smiled sadly. "And one day, when enough of you is hollowed out, you hear 'em calling again." The kitchen light flickered briefly. Neither man moved. Trevor closed his notebook slowly. There was nothing else to say, because the worst thing wasn't that Daniel Reese had been taken. The worst thing was knowing he was still being taken, piece by piece, while the world spun on, blind and deaf and blissfully unaware. Chapter 12. The Silent Witnesses. Daniel lit another cigarette with shaking fingers. The smoke curled around the hanging light bulb, making the kitchen feel even smaller. He spoke without looking at Trevor now, voice low, worn flat by years of isolation. "I'm not the only one, you know." Trevor listened closely, pen hovering over the page. Daniel exhaled a long breath. "Other folks round here, they saw pieces of it too, a light from their windows. Missing time they don't talk about." He tapped the table with the tip of his cigarette, leaving a small black mark. "You ask around, you'll find 'em. Folks who wake up in the wrong room. Folks who hear their dogs bark at empty fields. Folks who find footprints where no one should be walking. Trevor jotted a few quick notes. Fragmented community memory. Event trauma distribution? Daniel chuckled dryly. But they don't tell you their stories. Not unless you already know. Not unless you carry the smell of it. Trevor looked up. Daniel's eyes were steady now, sad. You can't fake it, Mr. Lennox. They see it on you. The knowing. The remembering. Outside, the mist boiled thicker around the windows, turning the world into a slow-moving dream. Trevor thought about what it meant. To be part of a story you didn't want. Trapped in a conversation no one else would ever believe. Daniel spoke one last time, almost a whisper. We're not survivors. We're witnesses. And they don't let witnesses go. The recorder clicked softly as Trevor switched it off. Some truths didn't need to be recorded. Some truths simply had to be carried. Chapter 13. The Night Between Worlds. Trevor stepped outside into the early morning mist. The door creaked softly behind him as Daniel Reese stayed inside, swallowed once again by the heavy quiet of his life. The sky was a dark smear of fading stars, the eastern horizon barely hinting at dawn. Trevor stood on the gravel drive for a long time, his recorder still warm in his pocket but switched off. The mist coiled low over the fields, tendrils brushing the fence posts and the empty road beyond. It wasn't just moisture in the air. It was memory. It was residue. Trevor pulled out his battered field notebook and scribbled his final thoughts. Encounter classification. Non-visual contact confirmed. Emotional and spatial distortion consistent with advanced non-human intelligence. Persistent psychological imprint. Conclusion. Witness not merely observed an event. Witness entered a transitional space, a night between worlds. He looked out across the fields, and there, in the distance, he thought he saw them. Brief, flickering shapes at the edge of perception, too fast to name, too slow to ignore. They didn't move like animals. They didn't shimmer like mist. They were just there. Trevor pocketed the notebook, turned toward his truck. As he reached for the door, he paused. For just a second, he thought he heard it. So soft it barely registered. A voice. Not in words, not in sound, but a knowing. A quiet, patient welcome. You saw us once. You will see us again. Trevor climbed into the cab, started the engine, and drove away from the Reese farmhouse, the fields, the mist, the memory, but not away from the truth. Because some places you leave behind, and some places never leave you.